Let's go ahead and get on into it right now. We'll talk about the 5 biggest things that I saw in the protest just for our update. First, of course, Seattle Police Chief Carmen has announced that she will be retiring effective on September 2nd, so in less than a month from now. She held a news conference today to announce that retirement. Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan was also in that news conference. This actually broke last night. The story that she was going to announce her retirement today, and indeed about 11:30 local time here in Seattle, she did announce her retirement. Jenny Durkan, Mayor Durkan spoke first. Durkan said, quote, "No doubt Carmen Best was the right person," end quote, for the job there. Also, Jenny Durkan says she has no plans to search for a new chief this year, and she took a shot at the Seattle City Council, said that they're not giving direction. Durkan, speaking of the Seattle City Council, said they're not giving direction on exactly how the police department is going to be restructured and reformed, so she doesn't want to, and I'm just telling you what Jenny Durkan is saying, she doesn't want to actually open up that petition until she gets more assuredness of exactly how the department is going to look. Now, you could say that's a propaganda play. Oh, propaganda is too strong a word, but a political play on her part to pressure the city council. And also remember, she has been, Mayor Durkan, certainly on the side of SPD and Mayor Chief Best during this whole process. So it was interesting to see that play out. Best herself, she spoke about her reasons for retirement and mentioned it was due to the budget cuts, and she felt that she could not, again, her words, according to her ethics and morals, actually stay in that position when she didn't agree with the direction of the department. Best did release a note to all of the members of the Seattle Police Department. In that note, it is interesting that she did not take any shots at protesters. She did not take any shots at city council members who wanted to defund the department. Just wasn't in there at all. She did say, quote, "When it's time, it's time." And I think people on both sides of the spectrum would probably agree. Maybe it was time for new direction for the Seattle Police Department. Again, but Jenny Durkan says there's not going to be any plans to search for a permanent replacement this year. Over in Portland, this was pretty big news that I think broke either early this morning. I believe it actually broke early this morning, where Multnomah County District Attorney Mike Schmidt, he announced that he will not prosecute many, that's the word he used, many arrested protesters during the last couple of months of protests down in and around the city of Portland. The quote that he said, he's going to presumptively decline to press charges unless there is a direct evidence or accusation of property damage, theft, or threat of force. So again, pretty big news here because there's been a lot of arrests, and of course the scrutiny has been on Portland police, the PPB, and really the federal forces down there, although those are federal arrests. He won't have jurisdiction over that, District Attorney Smith. But he is not going to prosecute many of the protesters, again, unless property damage, theft, or threat of force. And he went on to say that he will not be prosecuting people if the charges include interfering with a police officer, disorderly conduct, or just general rioting, which can be a charge. So they will not be prosecuted for that, according to the district attorney. This is a statement. We'll see if he follows through on that, but that's what he announced. And the quote in here that also seemed to be a direct shot from the DA, perhaps to the police department, or certainly to some in the police department and some in the city, quote, "We would undermine the social safety net, not promote it," end quote, talking about if he was to prosecute those protesters. So very, very big news. Big news down in Portland, I thought there. And certainly some of the protesters, and a lot of the protesters who feel they were arrested for no reason at all, perhaps like Demetria Hester, big story yesterday, the leader of one of the Wall of Moms groups and a very prominent activist in that city, was arrested, and reports say she was just standing and shouting and was not doing anything illegal. I think the timing of this announcement by the DA certainly had a lot to do with the arrest of Ms. Hester. Over in Louisville, we told you the story yesterday that the city of Louisville, along with their police department, had announced that they were going to be arresting and citing people for protesting in the streets. Well, we thought legal action was going to come from that, and just 24 hours later, or less than 48 hours later after that announcement, legal action has been started. An attorney in Louisville has sued the city and the police department for violating protesters' constitutional rights. The suit says that the ban on caravans and marches in the streets actually contradicts state law in Kentucky that allows for protests as long as traffic can pass. So if traffic can get around, read a little bit about this law in Kentucky. The law says if traffic can pass protesters in the street somehow, it is not an illegal assembly, and the protesters, and really it doesn't say protesters, but anybody in the streets would not have to disperse. So the suit only goes after the ruling specifically in that they think it violates state law very specifically. And honestly, look, I'm not a lawyer, but after reading a lot of the opinions on this and a lot of the other legal analysis of that ordered by the city of Louisville, it does seem like they've got a big problem on their hands when it comes to the legality of that. There was another story in Virginia. The man who drove a truck through a Black Lives Matter protest in June in Richmond, Virginia, and injured multiple people, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison, 1 year each, for 6 misdemeanor charges. His name is Harry H. Rogers. He is a self-described leader of the Ku Klux Klan there. Social media posts referring to this. This was brought into evidence during the trial of Mr. Rogers. So again, 6 misdemeanor charges for each of the incidents and injuries. He does still face 3 felony counts that are still being prosecuted and tried right now. But he will face 6 years in prison, as that sentencing was handed down earlier. He did not face hate crime charges. That the prosecutors there tried to include hate crime charges, but those were dismissed around the fact, according to the rulings here, that 3 of the victims in that car assault were white. So they decided that hate crime statute did not apply there. But again, 6 years for the man Harry H. Rogers, who drove a car in Richmond, Virginia. Finally, and this isn't necessarily protest related, but certainly I think ancillary to why a lot of these protests are happening across the country in regards to police brutality and excessive force. A very disturbing video was released today of a 2018 incident where police officers in Key West, Florida, went into a school and were called by one of the substitute teachers in that school, and they handcuffed an 8-year-old, or tried to handcuff an 8-year-old special needs student who had pushed or hit a teacher in the chest. Anybody who's been around special needs students, or maybe you have those very wonderful people in your life, you know that sometimes dealing with them is different than dealing with other students. Well, apparently the substitute teacher there, nor the police, actually agreed with that assessment of mine and many others. They approached him in the school. Again, the video's out there. It's very disturbing. They tried to handcuff the kid. The cuffs were too big. So then they actually walk him outside. They give him a stern lecturing, and they haul him off to an adult prison. An adult prison. Now the video is just being released of this because, and the Florida police and Key West police say they don't know how the body cam footage got released, but the attorney, who has not yet filed suit against the city or the school district, but looks like legal action may be coming, actually somehow acquired this video and released it to the public, which, again, these incidents now, especially in schools, with police in schools, seem to be happening all the time. You go back to the horrid video that we saw, about a month ago, of police arresting and handcuffing a young black student, a young black girl student, who hadn't done her homework. And the teachers and school district there used that as an excuse to, I guess, call the police on that student. Maybe, I guess, in that case, the police were actually already in the school, and arrest her and haul her off. Remember, here in Seattle, and I know my hair, we're on the roof, got long hair, bear with me. I know that here in Seattle, one of the big pushes was no more police in schools in King County, and that was a recommendation passed down by the Seattle City Council actually last week that's gotten a lot more traction across the country, and really more bipartisan support across the country than some of the other demands of the protesters. So again, we're just doing this midday update each day to kind of give you a rundown of the 5 biggest things maybe you need to be paying attention to. And like I always say, don't take my word for it. I'm just one source. Go read about these on your own and go straight to the facts. And remember, trust your independent local journalists. They're giving the picture of this and the full story of these incidents, frankly, a lot better than a lot of the mainstream news is. And a lot of the mainstream news is actually just using footage and first-hand accounts of freelance journalists across the country and then kind of hijacking it of their own. A separate story here in Louisville, there's a streamer who goes by Riot Heart who had footage of an incident where a truck tried to drive kind of into protesters but was blocked by a car caravan, and then that driver was so aggressive he slammed into the bumper of a car in front of him, was hurling racial epithets at the protesters. Well, the Louisville police, without the permission of the streamer and the freelance journalist, took the footage, edited it, and released their own propaganda video that was then re-released by some news stations there. Forget the legality of that, which they could be sued all sorts of ways by this guy, and from what I understand, he is trying to take legal action or a cease and desist order on that. But there was so much pushback from that the streamer actually released the entire video, completely refuted the account of the police department that said in Louisville that the protesters were the aggressors, and they had just released the video of the protesters kicking the truck without showing the truck trying to drive into the protesters and then ramming into the back of another car, and the racial epithets that were hurled. So again, you talk about police propaganda. Well, that was quickly within 24 hours knocked away in Louisville. So I guess that's item number 6 here we didn't have. But again, this is why you need to go straight to the people on the ground, the independent journalists, the freelancers. Not saying that everybody who works for, a corporate company is bad or inherently not doing their job well. It's just those organizations have an agenda. And again, the Louisville incident really proves it. So just to run through the 5 items really quick, if you missed any of this, we're going to end the video. You can go back and watch it. But Seattle Police Chief Carmen announces her retirement, going to be effective on September 7th. In her letter to SPD yesterday, she did not take any shots at the protesters nor City Council. However, today in her press conference, she did say it was the budget cuts that led to her abrupt retirement. Multnomah County DA, that's the Portland County DA, said he will not prosecute many of the protesters who were arrested. They will not be prosecuted for interfering with a police officer, will not be prosecuted for disorderly conduct, will not be prosecuted for rioting. He says property damage, theft, or threats of force will be prosecuted, but he doesn't want to undermine the social safety net of that city. And then we saw again the city of Louisville sued for what the suit alleges is unconstitutional restrictions on protests in that city. We had the man who drove a truck in Virginia through protesters in June. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, 3 more felony charges still being prosecuted there. And then also a video in 2018 of cops in Key West, Florida, attempting to handcuff an 8-year-old special needs kid. That failed because his wrists were too small, and then they hauled him off to an adult prison. Pretty disturbing stuff. Go watch the video. I'm Seth Dunlap for Frontline Access. Our rooftop midday update for Tuesday, August 11th is in the books. Please like and share this video. And as always, we're independent journalists. We count on your contributions and support. So if you're able to give even just a little bit, the links are in our bio, or at least pinned to the top of our Facebook page. Appreciate it. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.